This is Duke University.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thanks especially to y'all who are sitting down front, since we're in kind of a big room here. I'm Molly Starback, Director of the Office of Postdoctoral Services, and I'd like to welcome you to our panel discussion on non-faculty careers in academia for science and engineering PhDs. I'd like to begin by thanking our panelists for coming all the way over here and taking time out of their busy schedules to join us this morning and figuring out that it's not Bryan Student Center, but Bryan Research Center. We really appreciate you sharing your advice with our postdocs and graduate students. So our panelists today are Lauren Anderson, Research Development Associate for the School of Medicine Office of Research Development. Lauren received her PhD in neurobiology and did her postdoc here at Duke. Yay. Elizabeth Johnson is the Associate Director of the Duke Institute for Brain Sciences. She received her PhD in neuroscience and also did her postdoc here at Duke, and Elizabeth is the past president of the Duke University Postdoctoral Association. Latondra Murray is the Associate Director of the Professional Master's Programs for the Pratt School of Engineering. She received her PhD in Industrial Engineering. And Jory Weintraub is Assistant Director of Science Education and Outreach for the National Evolutionary Synthesis Center, known as NESSEN. He received his PhD in Immunology and just received an award for Outstanding K-12 Educator, is that right?
Something like that.
He's very modest. So I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves and briefly fill us in on their backgrounds, and then we'll start with questions. And a lot of you submitted your questions online, so thank you very much. We'll start with those and then move to questions from the general audience. So who would like to start? Lauren?
All right.
First in the alphabet.
I was very involved on campus as a graduate student and kind of stumbled my way into a postdoc. I wasn't quite sure that I wanted to do a postdoc. I wound up doing a year with the Drug Discovery Institute at Duke and then 2 years with the Department of Neurology. Both really great experiences, but really sort of impressed upon me that I did not want to be in the lab forever. And so I kind of went from there and went to a lot of these kinds of panels and workshops and talked with Molly an extensive bit and eventually narrowed down what I wanted to do and saw a job listing that took me 15 minutes to apply for because it was that perfect of a fit in my mind. And now I'm in the Office of Research Development at the School of Medicine.
And so I had a slightly different track. So I was a graduate student at New York University, came here to do a very traditional postdoc, stayed here to do a very traditional postdoc for over 5 years. And during that time, I think about maybe in year one, I got involved with the Postdoc Association, which is a pretty loose group at the time, trying to sort of sort out who they were and what they wanted. And I spoke up at a meeting, and because I spoke up, I got a title in the association. So that's a warning for all of you. Now it's a different organization now. So I led sort of a communications team of 2 people to try and help things. This was long before there was an Office of Postdoctoral Services here at Duke. Long before there was really any affinity groups at all, and then continued to be pretty vocal in the association, and was honorifically given the title of president about a year later after I was the communications director, because the then president got a job at NC State, and there were only 6 people in the association, so I was loud. So I got that, and about 6 months into that tenure as the president of the then Duke Postdoc Association, we were pushing to have an Office of Postdoctoral Services. We were sort of in midstream, and that was the year that Duke decided to pull out health benefits for postdocs that had their own NRSAs, and I was one of those. But I was also pretty engaged with a lot of people that had NRSAs, and I went and pounded on a few doors and said, this isn't fair. And basically instigated an entire university task force that went on to work for 3 years to develop policies that you guys probably may be aware of, but that gives postdocs the rights for health benefits and tries to be as equitable as possible. And it was because at the time those were being stripped away from a lot of people, and a lot of people that had families, and a lot of people that were leaving in droves. And so I got to know almost every administrator on campus here through that process, and I found that I actually really liked it. I had an advisor who was pretty flexible about my disappearing for meetings occasionally, because he knew it was an important job. And then he was named the first director of the Duke Institute for Brain Sciences, which was a new initiative on campus. And his advice, he was given advice to pull in someone who knew everybody on campus. And so he said he'd spent about 10 seconds and he said, well, that's Zab. And even though she's my postdoc, I think she would be really great at being able to help me build this thing. And I was on the faculty job market at the time and was getting interviews. And I went back and forth, and finally I decided that that was a really unique opportunity to build something from the ground up. And I decided I would take it on a temporary basis, and that if I only did it for a year or two, it probably wouldn't be so destructive to my scientific career, and then I could sort of evaluate, but that it would probably never fall in my lap again to have an opportunity like that. So I took it, and now we're 7 years in, and I'm an associate director and still doing research in neurobiology as well.
All right, so good morning, everyone. So I feel like my path was a bit different. So I'm an industrial engineer by training. My undergrad was in electrical engineering and computer science. So I went to North Carolina State for my doctoral work. In industrial engineering, a postdoc, in my field, postdoc wasn't really something that people typically do. And so when I came out of graduate school, thought about whether I wanted to pursue a faculty job or whether I wanted to go into industry. And my research was very applied as a graduate student. I did human-computer interaction work. And so very applied, very empirically based dissertation work. And I was really interested in, if I ultimately had a faculty career, I really wanted to have a foundation in industry to kind of bring back into the classroom. And so I thought about a faculty job, but decided I would pursue an industry opportunity. And so I interviewed with AT&T, with IBM, took an offer with IBM, and worked for IBM here locally in the park for almost 11 years. And so went in as a technologist doing human-computer interaction and design work in software group, and after about 3 years was tapped to go into management, which I was going to be a techie head, I was going to be a senior technical staff member. My goal was to go into industry and really kind of pursue the technical track versus the management track. But I got tapped and someone said, hey, are you interested in management? Here's an opportunity. And so I went into management after my first 3 years in the business, which was considered somewhat early. So went into management and stayed in management for the next 8 years. So 11 years, 3 years as a technologist, and then 8 years in management, doing a variety of things. I was a support manager, I carried a pager, supported clients when things broke and they were losing hundreds of thousands of dollars when our servers went down. I was a development manager, so I worked with very senior individuals who developed products for the market, go to market, kind of converting commercialization, moving advanced tech stuff into products, kind of to sell it, right, to make a profit. I was an operations manager. I supported a vice president, kind of as her go-to for all things that she needed done. If you guys have seen the movie The Devil Wears Prada, it was kind of like that. So I did that for almost 2 years. And then I was an architecture manager where I worked with various senior developers, developing architecture for some of our key software infrastructure platforms. And so I did that for about 11 years. Learned a lot at IBM, really liked it, but always had kind of a yearning to reconnect with academia. And so a girlfriend forwarded an advertisement from the School of Engineering. They were looking for an associate director for professional master's programs. They wanted someone who could come in and serve as a manager for the services team, but they also wanted someone who could mentor and guide students who had business knowledge. And for me, it was a really good fit because having a business background, being in industry for 11 years, and then also still being very interested as a technologist, it was kind of a nice coupling to come into a school of engineering in that capacity. So I've been here at Duke for about 5 years, and I wear a number of different hats. I'm a manager, still personnel manager. I work with 200 plus students, professional master's students in the Pratt School of Engineering. I actually do research kind of on my own terms, which has been nice. One of the things that I struggled with was the whole kind of timing, and I have 2 small children. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. So for me personally, the timing was really important about publish versus perish, and if I would be able to get onto a tenure track and really make it work for me. In my current role, my manager is very supportive of me kind of doing research on my own terms. So I've written some publications since I've been here. I've presented at conferences with his support. So I think that's a little taste of me, my story.
So good morning. I noticed that when Molly introduced us, she mentioned all the people on the panel with Duke ties, but didn't mention that you're from state and that I'm from Carolina. So I don't know if we should take that.
I know, I was going to say.
So I went to grad school and did my
It was an
postdoc.
oversight, you know, I'm from UNC too.
I know you are. And if I had a Wake Forest shirt, I would have worn it. So you know where I'll be on Saturday night. Anyway, so I'm Jory. I work at a center called NESCENT, which is the National Evolutionary Synthesis Center. It's an evolutionary science research center, sort of administratively housed in the biology department here at Duke, but we're actually based at the Irwin Mill building on 9th Street, if anybody knows where that is. Anybody here familiar with NESCENT? Just out of curiosity? Okay, a couple of you. So, and I've been there for 9 years, which is as long as the center has been there. My background is I grew up in California. I was a biochemistry major as an undergrad. Took several years off between undergrad and grad school to work and travel and do all sorts of fun stuff. And but I was working as a technician in a research lab for a good part of that time, and so at a university. And so I got a pretty good sense of what life was like for people in tenure track positions. And I knew even before I went to grad school that that's not what I wanted. That I enjoyed studying science, and I was interested in continuing with my studies of science, but I didn't want to be a professor and run my own lab because I just saw what that life was like, and it wasn't for me. So when I went back to grad school, I went into a PhD program at Carolina, but never with the intention of being on that tenure track. I didn't really know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew that I really loved teaching and working with students and interacting more with people than being in the lab. And so I figured I'd do something along the lines of education. And as I was finishing up graduate school at Carolina, I heard about an opportunity to do a postdoc right there at UNC in the biology department that was focusing on science education and science outreach, and mostly focusing on outreach to underrepresented minority students. And so I sort of was really intrigued by that, and I discovered that I was fortunate enough to get the position and spent several years doing that, and really that's when I found my passion, that's what I wanted to be doing with my time. And so I was there at UNC teaching undergrads and developing undergrad courses, both for students at UNC and also through this partnership of historically black colleges around North Carolina. And I did that for many years and really loved what I was doing, and then found out about this opportunity to run the outreach program at NESCENT, which was just funded by the NSF and just getting going at that point. And even though my background was absolutely not evolutionary biology, it had always been biomedical science, I figured what the heck, I'll apply because I was always pretty interested in evolution as well. And I didn't think I'd have a chance of getting the job, but for whatever reason, I guess they had no other good applicants, so they took me. But it was great. I mean, it was, sort of midway through my career, I got to make this transition to a whole new discipline of biology. And I still don't consider myself an evolutionary biologist because it's not what my formal training is, but it's allowed me to really broaden my scientific horizons, which is a real sort of bonus for me. And so that's where I've been for the last 9 years, and I absolutely love my job. I work with students at all levels, K through 12, undergraduate, graduate, up through postdocs. Work with teachers, do teacher training, do a lot of outreach to the general public. As you can imagine, doing evolution outreach, especially at a center based in the South, can sometimes be a bit of an adventure, but it's never dull, and I love my job, so I feel like I'm one of the luckiest people that I get to go into work every day and really look forward to doing what I do.
Wow, thank you. Those were great intros. So you talked a little bit about your job, and it sounds like they involve administrative, management, research, and program coordination responsibilities. Can you describe those responsibilities, perhaps, an idea of what a typical day is like for you?
I should not start.
I think we probably all have pretty complicated days, and they're probably all different from one another. It's really hard for me to actually describe to people what I do. And so there's a great mystique, even among the staff in my office, about what exactly that happens there. But I think in general, I have now tended towards a description that is basically that I'm an executive manager for both the staff and all of the programs that the Institute runs and does. And it's sort of my job to help the director of the Institute direct strategies and visions, and also to sort of be there to give the sort of 25,000-foot view of how the operations are happening, how the budget is being managed. So I don't have to be in the weeds with the budget. I don't do any of the sort of weed whacking with the budget. I don't have to learn the Duke systems here, but I know about what our overall spending is. I work very closely with sort of the business and the grants offices to sort of be able to indicate on a very lofty plane how we're doing. I do a lot of the reporting. I negotiate a lot of the contracts, which get complicated in interdisciplinary contexts in academia pretty rapidly. Just an example of like a faculty hiring initiative where different parties are giving money to a faculty startup. It turns out there has to be a contract behind that, otherwise, all hell breaks loose pretty rapidly because people forget or the chairs change over and people lose the history of that kind of thing. So so I do that kind of work, and I'm basically a go-to person for all the staff. We have 15. So I have a staff of 15 people that help run programs and manage budgets and are really the hands on deck, and it's really through their energy and sort of relentless creativity that we get a lot of stuff done. And so I sort of have to be there to sort of make sure that someone knows all of the things that are happening throughout the whole initiative. And we also have an incredible educational branch. So we run the undergraduate neuroscience major here on campus. We're one of the only non-departments to do that. So there are challenges involved with that. Everything from finding advisors to managing what kind of curriculum things are part of. We also manage a graduate program that's a little bit unusual and has a few nuances that make it complicated. So there is no typical day for me. I know that I come in and I know I have a few major deadlines that I have to meet throughout the academic year that are pretty big. But other than that, it's like, I'm multitasking. I am always busy. It's one of the best things about the work that I do is that I'm never bored. I'm never doing a grindy thing. I'm basically never doing the same thing twice. And that's one of the most fulfilling aspects of the job. And I can really be there as we develop and evolve as an institute, and can be really there on the ground, running with new initiatives and with real creativity, and rather than sort of the normal day-to-day grind.
I'm glad she went first because my job is completely different, and a lot of the things that were in the question I don't actually do. So our office, we are grant writers for the School of Medicine, and we work with faculty members, especially junior faculty members with their first R01 applications, as well as more complex grants, so your P30 grants, your U's, and we work with those teams typically from start to finish. So when the PI of that grant decides that they want to submit that grant, or they mentioned at a department meeting that they're thinking about applying for that grant, we usually get involved and help them organize the teams and really just shepherd that grant from its initial stages to when they hit the submit button with grants.gov or whatever organization they're working with. There are actually 12 offices like ours at Duke. They tend to be pretty small. Some are one-person operations that are based in the departments. The Department of Medicine has one. There are a couple of people in the School of Engineering. Nichols School has an office. There are 4 people in our office, and we cover the entire School of Medicine, which is a little daunting at times. But our typical day is writing or meeting with faculty members to discuss their ideas, what their strategies are, and try to pre-review their grants before they are in fact submitted. So even though my background is in neuroscience, my coworkers are chemistry and molecular biology and population science, we have to learn about immunology, and when we have collaborators in the School of Engineering, we have to learn a little bit about engineering. And so it's a constant learning process, and even though our days are, I would guess, pretty stable, we're writing most of the day, it's incredibly flexible with the grant cycle. I'm here right now because it is a lull. You all know the R01s went in March and February, and the next huge set of deadlines is in May. So right now we're out trying to get a feel for, you know, who's applying for what, and yeah, completely different.
And I can add to that too. So my day, it just depends on what pops off when I walk in the door. So typically I'll check email the night before because I don't really like surprises. So if there's something on the edge that has happened, a lot of times I'll have a headlight to it. For me, so I manage a team of 7. I'm a personnel manager for a team of 7. It could be anything from one-on-ones to my team, to strategizing with my manager about budget, to teaching a workshop. I teach in my program, and so it might be delivering a 7 Habits of Highly Effective People workshop, where I focus on soft skills and kind of professional skills for our students. It could be anything in that area. I could have a student who's homesick, who has barricaded herself in the office with one of my employees, right, who really wants to talk with someone to get some support. It could be someone who's having an argument with their roommate, who doesn't quite know how to broker the issue, or someone who has a challenge with a professor. It could be someone who just wants some guidance around career or around what they should do with their lives, who wants to come and huddle and have a one-on-one. So there are a variety of either programmatic, managerial, administrative things that we do, logistics in terms of just getting things set up. So I'm already starting to plan fall 2014 orientation for our program, because we have to do that, right? We've got to have that much runway to prepare and to organize everything for our students. We travel to China and India. I have staff members who are traveling to China and India to meet with admitted students. So they're just a variety of pieces. I've traveled myself internationally in support of our program. So really just a variety of different things, but all in support of the student experience between essentially what I say is my team and I, we focus on getting students from orientation to graduation, right, and everything in between. All of the educational, academic, social, professional development, all of those activities kind of in between that create a holistic experience for our students, we're supporting it. And that means that anything can happen at any point, at any time. I was a food judge last Friday for an Iron Chef competition, right? I mean, yeah, that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Ever, yes. So all sorts of things.
So Zab mentioned that she's usually at 25,000 feet looking down, and my job, whenever possible, I like to stay in the weeds, so that's where I'm happiest. So my favorite thing that I do is, the thing that's the most fun is to get out there and work with students and teachers. And so I try to do that as much as possible. You know, a lot of the programs that I develop and that I run are specifically designed to get myself and my colleagues at NESN, the other evolutionary scientists, out into classrooms and working with students and working with teachers. And so I have all sorts of amazing experiences. A couple weeks ago, I spent a week in Alabama doing outreach on evolution to students at elementary schools in towns of 800 people, so teeny towns in very rural Alabama, places where scientists never go, right? And so part of this program is just to get scientists in the classroom and let students meet scientists and see what science is all about and talk about science careers. The week before that, I was in Arizona, and we did some outreach on a Native American reservation. And 2 weeks before that, I spent a week in the Galapagos talking about evolution with students and doing training workshops for teachers on how to teach evolution. So it's pretty amazing, fun stuff that I just feel, like I said, I feel really lucky to get to do it. But of course, that stuff doesn't set itself up. So when I'm not doing those things, I'm spending my time in my office establishing these programs and building these partnerships. And so I do have days, as unglamorous as it sounds, where I do nothing but send email all day long. I mean, I won't even pick up a phone. It's just email after email to set up programs and to set up partnerships and collaborations and to make plans to go visit schools and things like that, and to write grants to get money to pay for these types of trips. So I often say that the best way to describe my job is, none of you are probably old enough to remember the Ed Sullivan Show, but there was a guy that used to be on the Ed Sullivan Show, and he'd have these sticks, and he would have a plate on top of each stick, and he would spin the plate, you know, and it would balance and spin on the stick. And then he'd run over and he'd start spinning this stick, and then as he was doing that one, this plate would start to wobble, and so we'd have to run back over and keep that one going. And so that's sort of my job, is that I keep all of these plates at different phases of being ready to fall off the stick. And so throughout the year, it's a little bit of, you know, finishing off programs that I've been setting up, and a little bit of starting new programs, and you know, a little bit of going out into the classroom and working with the students and the teachers. So just a bit of everything.
So you've spoken about this a little bit, but maybe you could elaborate on any recommendations you'd have for a postdoc or a graduate student who is currently conducting bench research and who wants to move into administration or program leadership or grant writing positions like yours. How do you get from point A to point B?
You seem to start down there.
Yeah. I would say as much as you can to get out of the lab and talk to the people who are in these positions, because what I've noticed just with the people that I've worked with is nobody has the same path there, and sometimes it helps hearing someone else's story to figure out how you go from point A to point B.
Yeah, I think there are a variety of both informal and formal ways to, I think informational interviews are really great. I think they can be really helpful, and if nothing else, it actually networks you. So I think that networking is probably the most important thing for many of these jobs, just like it would be really for a faculty job as well. Don't belittle networking. The more people that you know, the more people that know the kinds of things that you're looking for, the more that people will give you a heads up about certain things. There's also a really great conference that's held in North Carolina every year that's called Science Online. It just happened. I can't say enough great things about that for people that are really looking for something that may have an educational outreach component, or a writing component, or a communications component instead of direct bench lab work. They bring people that work at science museums, and that's a great networking opportunity. It's also, I think, something that lies completely outside of the normal scientific context, scientific conference context, although you can network there as well. There are often booths and things that are really important, so I can't stress networking enough.
I would echo the sentiments. I think networking is absolutely key. You never know what the possibilities may be, and having a conversation with people about their path, while your path may not be the same, it's a way to get some insight about the kinds of doors, the kind of avenues that can expose you to different opportunities.
So I'll address specifically getting opportunities in education and outreach, since that's what I do, and I'm not sure how many of you are interested in that, but if you are, it's never too soon to start reaching out to teachers and volunteering to go and talk to students and do sessions in classes. I guarantee you will never meet a teacher at the K through 12 level who wouldn't absolutely love to have a scientist come in and talk to her students. Sorry, that was really sexist. His or her students. It is true that probably 90% of the teachers I work with are women, but there's, you know, male or female teachers are always happy to have scientists come in and talk to their students. I mean, you can develop hands-on, engaging, interactive activities, and you can, you know, take them out into the field and do all sorts of lab work and stuff, but you don't even need to do that much. You can just go in and talk about what your life as a scientist is like, and what's fun about being a scientist, and, you know, a day in the life of a scientist and that sort of thing. You know, teachers just love to introduce their students, science teachers especially love to introduce their students to these opportunities. And so, you know, wherever you can, just volunteer to judge a science fair, or go in and talk to a AP biology class, or, you know, they do events at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences all the time, and they're always looking for scientists to set up a little table and lead an activity, hands-on activity with their visitors about what you know, what's a fossil, or, you know, what is a molecule, or, you know, what stump the expert kind of thing. So there's tons of ways to get experience doing outreach, and it sort of becomes like a you know, a snowball effect, where the more you do it, the more opportunities you get to go back and do more of it. So if you think you want to do some sort of outreach type of, or teaching type of position, start by just going into classrooms and talking about what your life as a scientist is like.
So are these jobs stable as compared to regular, you know, traditional faculty jobs? Is it dependent on funding that you have to get yourself? Like Dory, you mentioned that, or writing grants for other people in Lauren's case. And how does the pay compare to traditional jobs?
I don't think that there's a stable job. I mean, job stability is it's just a funny thing. You know, it's as stable as any other job. We were sort of giggling about that earlier, but there are no guarantees. That said, usually you have sufficient warning. So I think probably all of us have different, are funded off of different mechanisms. And that can evolve and change. You know, sometimes your position will be grant funded for a time, and then it might be institutionally supported. In academia, you may be required to, you know, to earn your keep in part or in full. I think that it really just depends on the particular position. The educational programs might change over time, which might change the landscape. I don't think right now faculty positions are particularly stable either. I think many of you are probably in the room, maybe because of that notion, you know, that grant support is changing really rapidly. It's going to change the whole academic landscape, I think, in the biomedical sciences in particular. But I don't worry that the next day I'm not going to have a job. And I think that if you do your job well, there will probably be another place for you somewhere else without too much effort if you're in one of these positions, because there are other positions that are like it or use those kinds of skill sets that you can apply to. I don't think that it limits you to one thing at all. So that's my perspective. As far as pay goes, I don't know. I mean, you know, I don't know what other people make. So that's never factored into things. But I know that I find it a reasonable amount to live off of. I don't live in New York City, I live in Durham. So there are those aspects that I have evaluated when like other job offers have come across my door where I think like maybe I couldn't afford that if I lived somewhere where the cost of living was higher. But in general, I think I roughly make the same as tenure track faculty do.
Well, you should have put our salaries right along.
Yeah. The big question.
I was going to say, I mean, I would agree. I mean, I think in terms of stability, I don't think that there is such a thing as a cradle to grave, I'll be here forever, kind of job. And I think that's actually a dangerous, mentality to have. I think that it's important to be a little more forward thinking and to always be mindful of the value that you are providing in any situation, right? What is the core value that you provide? If your organization did the lifeboat exercise, would you be in the lifeboat or would you be left behind in the water, right? If people had to, I mean, seriously, right? What are you doing to differentiate yourself in what you do? That's whether you're faculty, whether you're in a staff position, whether you're in industry, whether you're in government. I think no matter where you are, you've really got to be mindful of what you do that makes a difference. So that's my thought about that. I think you've always got to be mindful of your skills. How are you growing your skills? How are you continuing to engage with your network? How are you adding value? How are you challenging yourself? And things become kind of routine and kind of boring and known quantity, are you continuing to stretch yourself even personally in ways, right? Are you taking risks, even if it's managed risk, where you're going off and you're learning a new technique or meeting new people or learning about a different part of the business or the organization or the university, right? What are you doing? So I think those things are all really super important. I did come from industry. So from a salary perspective, I kind of remember rocking a little bit in the fetal position when I came to academia. In all seriousness, I mean, I have what I need. My family, we've been able to do what we need to do. We don't live an extravagant lifestyle. I don't have any summer homes. I don't have, any boats or anything, lavish from a lifestyle perspective. I also have 2 kids, right? So that's where a lot of my financial kind of investment goes. It's been more than reasonable, right? Is it what I got paid in industry? No, it's not. Okay, but I also left industry for some really specific reasons, right? So as a manager, I'd laid people off every year for the last 3 years that I was a manager. I'd looked across the desk at someone and looked them in the eye and said they had 30 days to find a job, right? I built countless PowerPoint decks. And I was like, what am I doing with my life? For this, I got a PhD! As I worked on yet another PowerPoint deck, right? So for me, it was a really personal decision. I did not feel that my passions and my talents were being leveraged in the way that I wanted them to be kind of leveraged in industry. I learned a lot from industry. I will forever be grateful to IBM for the experience I had there. It actually positioned me really well for the job I have now, having that industry experience. But in terms of fulfillment, in terms of interacting with students, in terms of teaching, those are really my passion points, right? Those are really the things that energize me and make me really excited about coming to work every day. So I made a very purposeful choice when it came to dollars, right? But for me, from a fulfillment perspective, I'm really happy. I have what I need, and it was absolutely the right choice for me. Absolutely.
So anybody in this room who went into science to get rich, raise your hand.
Yeah.
Right? We all know the reality, right? None of us are doing what we're doing because we thought we'd make lots of money. I could have been an NBA player, but I chose to go into science. We make choices. But no, I mean, like I keep saying every time I speak, I feel so lucky because I feel like I have the absolute most fun job I could possibly have. And to me, that's worth so much more than dollars and cents. I have 2 kids and they're both in high school. My daughter's a senior, so she's getting ready to go off to college and figure out what to do with her life. And I just keep telling her, find what makes you happy because you're going to be spending a lot of your time, whatever it is, you're going to be spending a lot of your time doing it. And if you are lucky enough to have something that you enjoy doing, that's going to be worth a lot more than dollars and cents. So, now having said that, here goes all of the cheerful optimism down the toilet because our center, NESM, where I work, we're funded by the National Science Foundation. And from day one, they said, we give you 10 years of funding, and no matter how much we love you, you'll get 10 years of funding, and that's it. And if you were paying attention earlier in this session, you heard me say I've been at NESM for 9 years. So if anybody out there is hiring, we're funded through the end of this year, and we're working really hard to try to find ways to keep keep ourselves going after that, but there's no guarantees. So, you know, at the same time, I'm starting to look around for other opportunities. But having said all that, I've had, you know, 9 years of not having to wonder where my paycheck was coming from, and it's a lot better than industry, isn't it? I have a lot of friends from grad school who went to work at Glaxo or, you know, some pharmaceutical company who live their whole life with their neck on the chopping block and feel like any day they could come, you know, they get paid more, but they have that constant stress of not knowing if their job is safe for another, you know, 30 days or whatever. So, you know, I guess, you know, in an ideal world, we'd all have tenure and have jobs for life. But that's such an unreal scenario for most of the world anyway, you know, that I feel like having had basically a guaranteed paycheck for the last, what will be 10 years, is about as good as it gets in my line of work. So again, I feel pretty lucky with that.
Perfect segue. He's been at Nesset for 9 years, and they've got funding for 10. So long as people need funding, professors are writing grants and manuscripts, I have a job. So I actually feel like my job is pretty stable. And so long as a university believes in the academic enterprise, I have value to that organization. And the one thing that I would encourage all of you to think about is, what am I really good at, and who does that matter to? Because you have a skill that somebody else needs, and it's just a matter of figuring out who that person is. So as far as stability goes, if you can figure out what it is that you do really well that somebody else needs, you will be able to find a job doing something that you enjoy doing.
I think that the important point, though, is if you like grant writing, that would be a great job, right? A lot of people think that writing grants is the worst part of science, right? If you like teaching, my job is a great job, but a lot of you probably think teaching is the worst part of being in science, right? So again, I don't want to, you know, harp on this too much, but I think the key is figure out what it is you like to do and go down that path. You know, don't go because you think there's lots of money there or there's more stability. Do it because, I mean, maybe this is too idealistic, but I really do believe that you have to love what you do, or it's going to be a long, long life. And not in a good way.
So we have any questions from the audience? Yes.
What sort of professional development do you do beyond your PhD to prepare you for the position you have now? Like, do you do any other, you know, somehow gain any other credentials officially? An MBA program or?
I actually stumbled through quite a few other interests before I wound up here that has actually proven to be useful because we work with all of the School of Medicine. Doing an internship with regulatory affairs has been helpful for all of the faculty members that are doing drug development, because that is a perspective that I can offer. I was a freelance editor for a couple of years, which, if you're writing and editing grants all day, best practice you could ever get. I think if there's an interest that you have, if there's a skill that you can acquire that is of interest to you, do it.
And so, Lauren, you're referring specifically to the DCRI clinical research internship here at Duke, is that?
DTMI.
DTMI, okay, sorry.
DTMI with Bruce Burnett's group. Yeah.
And your editing was through American Journal Experts?
Yes.
So, American Journal Experts, look them up. Thanks.
For me, I've been led kind of by personal interests as far as that goes. So I was in Toastmasters in graduate school just because I wanted to defend my dissertation without passing out. That was my goal. And so I did Toastmasters, and it's turned out to be really helpful because now I do a lot of facilitation in my current role. I do teaching and facilitation. I taught in graduate school, but I never thought that I would be back in front of the class in the classroom that I am now. So I teach and facilitate programs. I've done 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That's a certification through Franklin Covey. You have to be certified to deliver that programming. That's turned out to be really advantageous because now I deliver that programming to our grad students. I also recently obtained a certification as an executive and personal coach. And that was purely a personal interest of mine, that I thought, wow, I'd love to work on coaching. It seems I'm in a lot of advisory situations with students. I'm trained as an engineer. I was not trained in a student affairs curriculum, and so I felt the need to grow those skills. I did it informally, but I thought, oh, I'll formalize it with this certification program. And so that's something that I've done, really did on my own and funded on my own. It wasn't even something that I went to my manager and sought funding for, because I believed in it so strongly from a personal perspective and wanted to make that investment in myself. So.
I don't have any specific sort of advanced credentials. You know, my path was that I started in science, and now I'm doing science education. And but I have no formal training whatsoever in teaching or in education or pedagogy or anything like that. I come from a purely science background. And there's times where I think that's a bit of an issue, because, to be honest, I think sometimes when I'm interacting with formally trained educators, they say, well, you don't know anything about education, you're a scientist. And then when I interact with the scientists, they say, well, you're not a scientist anymore because you teach, you know. So you know, I could have gone and gotten a teaching credential or something like that, but I don't think it would have made a difference for me personally. And the path that I followed, it was mostly just sort of being creative and being energetic and having a passion for it, and on-the-job training. I'm not saying that's necessarily the best way, but that's sort of the path that I followed, and it seemed to work okay.
And I'm very similar, so I haven't done any advanced credentialing, and I think that I wouldn't dissuade people from doing programs, especially leadership programs or things that really facilitate something on the job that would really enhance. But we're all getting PhDs or have PhDs, and that's actually a pretty good basis. You know how to dive into something into depth. You usually know how to write with clarity. Many of you have had experiences in front of a classroom or in front of a seminar, delivering your topic and trying to step back from the nitty-gritty and do those kinds of things. And many of you have had handwriting experiences and et cetera. But I think that the hardest thing for me as far as on-the-job training was how to manage people, because that was not something that the classic scientific education track ever teaches you to do. I think that's the same for faculty. You manage people, and I got burned a few times by making some mistakes. I'm a much better manager now than I used to be in the beginning of that track. And there are things that I wish I had done differently over time, but now I think that there are things that, there are many more things that I know about how to be a much more effective manager, how to rally a team, how to know when people are not doing well, how to know to inspire people, how to make sure that people are doing their work, how to let people do their work. All of those things have been a learning, growing experience for me.
There's lots of things that a PhD program does not teach you how to do.
That's true.
It's the first thing you learn when you finish.
Other questions? Okay, 3 of you have children of varying ages. What would you say about your work-life balance?
Is there such a thing?
Yeah, I'll say for me, from a work-life integration perspective, I have a lot of flexibility here in my role, right? So my son does physical therapy and occupational therapy once a week, and I have a lot of leeway to be able to go and take him to his appointments. My daughter just started kindergarten this year. A lot of flexibility to be in her programs or volunteer in her classroom, and that is due much in part, I think, to a very supportive manager and a very open communication relationship with my manager. For me, between industry and academia, that hasn't really changed, right? I had that flexibility in the industry as well. I think in my line of work, as long as there's a laptop and an internet connection, and now there's a camera and I can Skype in and do all sorts of things, there's some things I have to do in person, but I've got a lot of flexibility. And certainly from a life perspective, I think this environment has been much more conducive to my family situation. My husband would nod in violent agreement versus in comparison to my work at IBM. So it's been good.
Yeah, I would echo that there's a really nice thing about flexibility. That said, I still work long hours, and I work at home. Again, anywhere that you have a laptop and an internet connection, you're going to be at work. I find it very hard to actually even go on vacation and not continue to do my job, and I have some regrets about that. But at the same time, it can get really dangerous to not be in touch, and part of that is because of being in a management role, and some of that is because of directing enterprises that have to keep going. So I just, but that said, I have a really flexible partner who works from home, who's a programmer, and that really helps. But this week, for example, with the storm, that completely corrupted everything. So I had to pick up my son at noon on Monday. On Tuesday, the schools were closed or delayed. That mucks up everything. I have a really, really important deadline this month. And then they told us, oh, there's an early dismissal on Wednesday, and there's a teacher work day on Friday. So it's like, when do you get your work done, especially when your children are small and they really need you? That I think is always a huge challenge, no matter what. When you have two working parents or one working parent even. So I think it's a day-to-day struggle, and it's hard.
So anybody who went into science because they thought it would be a 9-to-5 job, raise your hand. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, and I've been a single parent for 9 years of 2 kids. So I don't feel like I have. I don't know if work-life balance is, if I've figured that one out yet. I spend every second of my time waking hours, either parenting or working, which is probably not healthy, but have I mentioned I love my job? So that's the flip side to it, is fortunately I spend a lot of time doing something that I really enjoy doing. If it were a job that were miserable and I spent as much time doing it, then I can't even imagine. But it is a flexible, my path has been fortunately a very flexible one as well. I mean, I sort of work when I need to work, and when my kids need me, I'm there for them. And unless I'm traveling, which I do a fair amount, then I'm completely flexible. And it's also a lot easier now that my kids are in high school, and my oldest one drives, and so all they need me for now is money, I guess. Gas money. But no, it's. I remember very well the days of starting a new job. Like I said, I've been a single parent for 9 years. I've also been at NESSEP for 9 years. So I was starting a new job, newly divorced, 2 kids that were 6 and 8 years old. It was a tough time, but my kids are the greatest thing in my life. My work is a close second, but I've never had any problem ranking them that way. And so you make it work. I mean, if it's important to you, you find a way to make it work.
Questions? Shana?
So from what I hear from your backgrounds, do you think that PhD made you a better candidate for your job? Did you require your scientist education for your job? Or you think that even a master's person could really do your job? And why and why not at all? I know about the grant writing part. So I'm not picking on you.
Yeah, I think. I don't. In my field, people tend not to get master's degrees. So from my perspective, still embedded in what my field of training was for this particular job, I think the PhD is really relevant. And I think that there are many jobs within our institute where that's not the case, and advanced degrees help you to some degree, but maybe aren't a requirement. They could be just as fulfilling. But my particular job, I think, actually really requires that that I actually have experience in all aspects of education through the sort of science of it at a PhD level. So absolutely, I think I use my degree every day.
I do not use my degree every day. But I will say that I think the PhD has been my secret sauce, right? So when I went into industry, I started at a higher level in industry because I came in with a PhD. I think I was afforded different opportunities because I'd been through the rigor of a PhD program, and that's why I was able to go into management in 3 years. I know that a PhD played a role in that. When I was in industry, ironically, my team did research grants with universities. And we had research grants with Duke, ironically, when I was at IBM, right? My particular group funded research at Duke. Having a PhD, in fact, I remember my manager saying to me, well, you have a PhD, so it's great that you're in charge of our academic relationship because that'll mean a lot to those folks in academia that you've got a PhD, right? So it was always a differentiator. Coming here to the program, I think someone with a master's degree could perform my job to an extent, but I think that I have an insight and experience, just kind of a foundation that came from my experience having a doctorate in industry. And I think even as a director in my program now, there is a way that I can interact with my manager and his manager. The three of us having PhDs and having been in industry, there is a way that we can team that would I think be very different if someone else were in my role. So it's been an advantage, not a necessity, but I think a clear advantage for me, both in industry and in academia.
So my PhD is in immunology, and I do outreach in evolution center. So in a way, not at all. I mean, I don't use my immunology knowledge at all in my day-to-day job. But what I do use every single day are the problem-solving skills and the critical thinking skills and the time management skills and all of the other stuff that it takes to get the PhD. So my PhD could almost have been in anything, and it was just the fact that I suffered through those 5.5 years and learned the skills that you need to get that degree that I now use on a daily basis. And then also, as Latondra said, a little bit of it, for better or for worse, is just having those letters after your name opens some doors and creates some opportunities. And it definitely, I think people, I never ever introduced myself as Dr. Weintraub, but right there on my email signature it says Dorian Weintraub PhD, because when I send emails to people I don't know out of the blue and I say I'm trying to put together this program, would you be interested in collaborating? I think they see that and it makes a difference, you know. So.
There are many non-PhD grant writers out there, and it does give you an advantage.
And that's all there is to that.
If you can sit in a room with a faculty member and they know at the very least, if you didn't understand a word they said, you can go and in 5 minutes, you know, be with it enough to help them out, it makes a difference.
Very good. Well, we have reached our time limit, so on that note, let's thank our panelists.